الصلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه عليك بنبيك الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. يا أبا القاسم، يا رسول الله، يا إمام الرحمة، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله. اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن، يا أمير المؤمنين، يا علي بن أبي طالب، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله. اشفع لنا عند الله يا فاطمة الزهراء، يا بنت محمد، يا قرة عين الرسول، يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله. اشفعي لنا عند الله يا أبا محمد، يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله. اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا عبد الله، يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله. اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن، يا علي بن الحسين، يا زين العابدين، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله. اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا جعفر، يا محمد بن علي أيها الباقر، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله. اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا عبد الله، يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله. اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى أيها الرضا، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد أيها الحادي النقي، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي العسكري، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا وسي الحسن والخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا سادتي يا موالي، إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله، وتوسلت بكم إلى الله، واستشفدتم بكم إلى الله، فاشفعوا لي عند الله، واستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله، فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله، وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله، فكونوا عند الله رجائي. يا سادتي يا أولياء الله، صلى الله عليهم أجمعين، ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالميهم من الأولين والآخرين، آمين رب العالمين. All the surah are muhimmat, especially for today's Majlis, Surah Al-Fatiha.
Thank you, Brother Abbas, for that beautiful recitation. And now if I can welcome Brother Hasnan to please come. Can we welcome him with a loud salawat?
Salawat.
अफसोस नबी ज़ादियों का शाम में जाना, सज्जाद से पूछो। अफसोस नबी ज़ादियों का शाम में जाना, सज्जाद से पूछो। सर नंगे वो माँ बहनों का दरबार में जाना, सज्जाद से पूछो। छुपती थी नबी ज़ादी के पीछे, किस शर्मो हया से और शिम्र का उन बीबियों के नाम बताना, सज्जाद से पूछो। बैठे हुए दरबार में सब छोटे बड़े थे, सादात खड़े थे। सर तश्त में रखा हुआ ज़ैनब को दिखाना, सज्जाद से पूछो। जब दुख्तरे शब्बीर ने जिंदान में क़ज़ा की, आफत ही खरी थी वो नन्ही सी मैयत बंदे हाथों से उठाना, सज्जाद से पूछो। अफसोस नबी ज़ादियों का शाम में जाना, सज्जाद से पूछो। सलाम।
I would like to welcome Brother Brother Ali Raza, please.
मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु फातिहा। मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद। ए मोमिनो जब मजलिसे शबीर में आना बच्चों का तुम्हें वास्ता ये भूल न जाना ये सोच के जी खोल के तुम अश्क बहाना मजलिस जहाँ होगी वहाँ आती है सकीना पानी ना मिला आज भी प्यासी है सकीना अल्लाह करे आए कभी ऐसा जमाना हो शाम के जिंदा की तरफ आपका जाना फट जाएगा दिल देख के वो गम का ठिकाना बेहाल हुई कब्र में सोती है सकीना पानी ना मिला आज भी प्यासी है सकीना यूं जानबे दरिया गए अब्बास से दिलावर और दरिया से मशकीज़ा भरा बादल मुज़तर दरिया की हर एक मौज ये कहती थी तड़प कर है तीसरा दिन हाय ना सी है जब छाने लगा ने की आई के लाशे पे हिना को कहीं एक कूजा लिए दश्त में आई है सकीना पानी ना मिला आज भी प्यासी है सकीना जब 11 मुहर्रम को सुए शाम से धारे दरिया की तरफ देख के ज़ैनब ये पुकारी अब्बास न मर जाए भतीजी ये तुम्हारी बेहाल मेरी गोद में बैठी है सकीना पानी ना मिला आज भी प्यासी है सकीना इस तरह सितम ढाते हैं अब जुल्म के बानी लाकर ये भरे कूजे बहा देते हैं पानी कुछ और भी बढ़ जाती है यूं तशना कहानी भाई की तरफ देख के रोती है सकीना पानी ना मिला आज भी प्यासी है सकीना ये जुल्म भी कम सिन पे सितमगारों ने ढाया, रखा है इसी कैदे वहां पर यको तन्हा, रहता है जहां में कयामत तेरा, डर डर के नम जाए अकेला पानी ना मिला भी, प्यासी है सकीना, प्यासी है सकीना है।
Thank you, Brother Ali Raza, for that beautiful recitation. And without any further ado, I would like to welcome Brother Mohsin to please start his lecture. Can we welcome him with a loud salawat?
The shahada for all of the rightfuls passed away of anyone just try it without salawat. So that we may be among his true followers, society bows. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وعلى سيدنا قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتاب الله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله إن الله صدق الله العظيم. صدق be a part of this gathering. Whatever is said and heard helps us gain proximity to the beloved Imam. As an invitation to this gathering. that took place during the time of the Imam, I feel there are some questions that arise that need to be answered, which again will help us benefit from looking at the history. And Alhamdulillah, I've received some good questions from some of the brothers as well. So I do thank you for that. This is a conversation for the most part. So inshallah, I think it's beneficial if I take this discussion further, keeping in mind those questions that were asked. Yesterday, we finished off by mentioning that our fourth Imam was up against those who had gone further than anyone else. What Yazid and his clan had been able to do on Ashura was so unthinkable that even when you look at the final conversation that Hur had with Umar ibn Sa'ad, he's asking him, is this actually going to happen? And the response he got was, even if heads have to roll, then I will fulfill the command of the Amir. And when he was pushed why, we all know the answer he gave. But you can tell even till that last moment, what they ended up doing was so unthinkable in accordance with or in relation with what had happened before or the crimes that were committed, let alone the crime being committed against the family of the Prophet. You have to remember, when we look at the stand of the Imam, and I hinted again towards this yesterday, it's very important to see who was standing up against him and how bad it was. It's very difficult for us to think of anything good in regards to Muawiyah because there was nothing good. But you have to remember, for the people of Sham, after it, according to their operations, it's not a joke that as he wills, he can change Jum'ah prayers, which are supposed to be on a Friday, to a Wednesday. And people accepted that. Why? There's a reason. Because that's how highly respected he was in the eyes of the people. Of course, he played his tricks. One of the main tricks that he played was saying to the people, do you not believe Allah is all-powerful? If he is all-powerful and I'm wrong to sit on this seat, then why doesn't he remove me? And the people were happy with that answer, not necessarily because they wanted Muawiyah there, but in one way or another, they saw benefit for themselves in him remaining there. The challenge of our fourth Imam was to clear the doubts like this that people had in their minds. But the point is, those who were opposed to him were held gods. And unfortunately, that was passed down to Yazid. Again, think about this. He did not pretend he was not trying to rule the Islamic world. At the same time, he did not tend to be a very good Muslim amount of side on one side, and the people had fought the Ahl, and the Imam had to fight against that. When the Imam and the caravan were taken to Sham and they entered the courtyard, you are in the center of the power of the person who has just butchered, and that was even in this situation. Again, I alluded to this yesterday. Even in this situation, when you're surrounded by all those who are specifically there to mock you and insult you and not to let you speak, before anyone could do anything, the Imam went on top of the pulpit and he began speaking. From this and other points and other events that took place, we understand, or you begin to understand, that one of the tools that the Imam was trying to get to us was the tool of sabr, remaining steadfast. And inshallah, today I'm going to do my best to try and open up on what this concept of sabr actually is. It's one of those concepts which our leadership has said repeatedly, our scholars have said repeatedly. It's one of those concepts that either because of the ignorant or because of the paid pens, the people have been pacified by the use of this concept, when it was there to do the exact opposite. It was there to be a tool to motivate, to energize, to keep you going. And the opposite effect has happened. When you think of sabr, you think of, okay, stay patient, you don't have to do anything, calm down. Is that the concept that Islam has of sabr? When we say that the Imam standing and giving that talk in the courtyard of Yazid was an act of sabr, are we saying that he sat down and didn't do anything? And he just let whatever was happening happen? No, we're saying that sabr there was him standing and giving that talk. So again, that's making us think that, okay, maybe we need to have a look at what this concept of sabr actually is. And think about this, like this same Imam, and this portion we'll take on to the next couple of nights. This same Imam who showed this courage, this bravery, this wisdom when he was not well, when he was exhausted, when his family had just been butchered, when he showed that resistance in the courtyard, by the time he got to Medina, by the time the caravan had returned back to Medina, he was feeling better. So are you telling me the next 35 years of the life of the Imam who took such a stand whilst he was in such a situation is going to be free from resistance against the oppressors? It's going to be a passive life in which he just sits in one corner and makes sure he doesn't get in trouble? Is there nothing we can learn from those 35 years? So inshallah, that is the direction that we will be going in the next couple of nights when we look at what happened in those 35 years. But as I said today, as a preliminary discussion, I think it's important to open up what this concept of sabr is and what relevance does it have to us, right? This stand that the Imam took, what relevance does it have to us? You have to remember the reason why the Imam said he rose up against Yazid was to bring about reform to the Ummah of the Prophet. Why? Because the Islam which existed in the Ummah stopped being the Islam which was defined by the Prophet. It stopped being the Islam that was sourced back to Allah, that you could see in the Quran. And the relevance I find, especially for us living in the West, again, I hinted towards this before as well, is that we are also living in a time, we may not be allowing this, but this is definitely happening, that everything other than Allah, the Prophet, the Quran, are defining what Islam is and what a good Muslim is. No one has a right to do that apart from Allah, the Quran, the Prophet, the Ahlul Bayt. So the same problem that our fourth Imam saw, for which he took the stand, it's very relevant to us because we're also living in a time where others are telling us what Islam is and what we can believe in and what we can do and can't do. Not just as individuals, even as institutions. And we need to figure out a systematic, strategic way to figure this out. You know, to have anyone other than the Quran or the Prophet tell us how a mosque or how a center should be run, it should be a very difficult pill for us to swallow. You know? we need to be very, very careful about how accepting we are of those guidelines or instructions that are given. And at the very least, fair enough, if you feel because of certain, because of the situation we find ourselves in, you have to accept it. You have to be at least showing some form of resistance, some form of this is not okay, but I understand, or whatever, right? Not just, yes, I understand. In fact, I'm willing to go 2 steps further just because I may be able to get some more benefits out of you. Remember this, the Islam we believe in, the foundation of it is La ilaha illallah, the rejection of the non-divine and the attachment towards Allah. So if the non-divine is telling you, this is the Islam you should be following, and this is how your mosque should be run, I can promise you they're not doing it to benefit themselves. I wish I could open up further on that, but we will end up being here a very long time if I do. So let me move on. Please recite this out loud. The point is we belong to a line which refuses to let others define what our Islam is. We refuse to allow others to define what our mosque can do and can't do, what our centers can do and can't do. That's our primary position. Yes, due to circumstances and secondary positions, we may have to compromise here and there, but that compromising does not mean you forget what your primary position is as a Muslim, as a follower of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and as the people who are listening now to the life of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. One of the questions that some ask at this point is, okay, sabr is an important tool to have if you have problems coming your way, if you have tests coming your way, if you want to have a life of, but I don't want to have a life of difficulty and trials and tribulations. So please can you change the topic from, night 3 onwards. And over here again, like this needs to be understood. And in reality, what our scholars tell us is that this needs to be understood by our children by the time they are 7 years old. What do they need to understand? What the reality of this world is. If you are a teenager or older and you are still saying, or you are still thinking you can choose tests and difficulties, you have really misunderstood what this world is. That in itself is a different topic. Essentially, because I mentioned it, I'll say it, there are 2. Number one, that this life is temporary and this world is temporary. It's not going to last forever. One of the most beautiful experiences I had when I was in Qom was seeing how beautified the graveyards are, how there are playgrounds in the graveyard. Families would regularly have a day out to the graveyard where they'll have a picnic, the children will be playing. Why? Because these kids from that age need to understand that, look, this world is temporary, this is where we have to end up. They're comfortable with it, especially as the follower of Ahlul Bayt. Remember, we are those who are not only comfortable with death, but death is comfortable with us. That's the first point that our kids need to understand. The second point is that this world will throw difficulties at you. This life will be full of tests, trials, tribulations. You cannot avoid it. You cannot avoid it. It's so important for them to understand this, because if they don't understand it by the age that they're 7 and they think that there is a comfortable way through this life, there is going to be a day where their world will be turned upside down and they will not be ready for it. Agha Panahian, I'm sure all of you have heard of and have listened to his amazing 3-4 minute clips. he says that one of the reasons, and he specializes in psychology and mental health now as well. He says that one of the reasons why we see so many people falling into depression and anxiety, and I'm talking about the serious level of depression and anxiety, is because they have grown up thinking that there will be no trials, tribulations, difficulties in this life, and all of a sudden there's this one event, or they experience something which literally sees the ground being pulled from under their feet, and they have nothing to stand. It's very important we realize that, look, you can't choose to have a comfortable life. If you are living, it won't be comfortable. There's just to burst the bubble of anyone who may think like this, it's been narrated from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam. So this was someone who was speaking to him who wanted to be comfortable. You can see that in the tone of the question. He says to the Imam, what is the path to comfort? And the Imam responds by saying, you have to go through your nafs. And his response to that is, okay, yes, I get that. But then once you've gone through your nafs, when does a person reach comfort? And the Imam responds by saying, the first day they enter heaven. Where is comfort? Heaven, not this life. Our fourth Imam, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. He has a beautiful narration in which he says that there are, if I'm not mistaken, 4 things people look for in one place, but it exists somewhere else. One of those 4 that he mentions is that people look for comfort in this world when it actually exists in the afterlife. Again, to burst your bubble. Surah Balad, verse number 4. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد. We created man in tribulation, in difficulties, in trials. Your creation was in this. How are you going to avoid it? This is the life that we are born into. This is what we have to go through. Atullah Makarim Shirazi says that if you see someone who is comfortable, then either you have not done enough research on that person to find out that they're actually not comfortable, or the comfort that is temporary. So this is the world we live in. Whether you like it or not, you will be tested. The question is, what can you do in the face of those tests? And again, that brings us back to, what did the Ahlul Bayt do? What did our 4th Imam do in the face of the difficulties and tests that he followed? And again, this brings us back to the discussion of sabr. Right? This is the tool that he has given us. That's why it's so important to open it up. In Surah Baqarah, verse number 153, the verse I had the honor of reciting at the beginning, it says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين. O you who have faith, take recourse or find help in patience, sabr, and salah. Indeed, Allah is with the patient. So we're being told, if you need help, right, there are 2 tools you have. One of them is sabr. Surah Al Imran, verse number 120. If some good should befall you, it upsets them. But if some ill befalls you, they rejoice at it. Yet, if you have sabr and taqwa, their guile or their scheme will not harm you in any way. Indeed, Allah encompasses what they do. So we've just painted the picture of how difficult this life is that we have to get through. We've also mentioned living in the West, the difficulties we have to face, how this discussion is relevant to us. And this verse specifically says that their schemes, all the schemes that we have spoken about that could harm you, very explicit here. What is the tool that you have to be protected from that harm? Sabr. Sabr. It couldn't be more clearer than this. So what is sabr finally? In its simplest form, sabr means to protect something, to put limits around something. When it comes to discussions of akhlaq, for example, sabr is a reference to protecting your nafs from becoming or going into a state of worry, of shaking, of wavering. That is what sabr is. Wrongly translated as patience. Sabr is not patience, or at least it's not what we think or how we use patience. And it's even more wrongly understood as acceptance. Just accept whatever is happening to you. Be patient with whatever is happening to you. Shaheed Mutahiri has a very powerful quote in regards to this. He says, sabr has one meaning in the Quran and a different meaning in the understanding of the people. Sabr in the Quran is a reference to resistance and steadfastness in the face of trials and difficulties. But in the dictionary of the people, it is a reference to sitting on your hands and waiting passively. Sabr in the Quran has positive connotations and requires determination and gives energy. However, in the understanding of the people, it is something that pacifies and stagnates. 5 years before the Islamic Revolution took place, you had the likes of Shaheed Mutahiri, you had the likes of Ayatollah Khamenei and other scholars who were on the forefront of trying to fight against the oppressive system. You see this wave of communities and specifically picking on these terms. Why? Because at the same time as the Islamic movement was trying to bring about a revolution, the communist movement was also busy in trying to bring about a revolution. And what they would do is they would come to the mosques and specifically say, when you have concepts like tawakkul, when you have concepts like sabr, how are you expecting to revolt against the Shah? These things pacify you. They make you sit down, and then you expect your religion to be the source of helping you bring about change. So you could see what understanding of these concepts existed. And subhanAllah, like as Shaykh Mutahiri says, and as we'll go through some of the verses in the Quran, you realize it's exactly the opposite. Not only is it not meant to pacify you, these are tools for your activism. These are tools to motivate you. In fact, they not only do they not pacify you, they keep you motivated at times when everything else and everyone else would have stopped. That's how powerful these concepts are, and that's why it was so important for the enemies of Islam to make sure that these concepts are defined in the wrong way. For example, we have the story of Hazrat Musa and Fir'aun in the Quran. So Fir'aun is preparing to attack Hazrat Musa and his followers. We see in Surah Al-A'raf, verse number 127 and 128. The elite of Pharaoh's people said, so those who were his advisors, will you leave Moses and his people to cause corruption in the land and to abandon you and your goals? Pharaoh responded, we will kill their sons and spare their women, and indeed we are dominant over them. Okay, so the picture is being painted, is being made very clear what the objectives of Pharaoh are. He wants to get rid of this movement. How? There are two ways. You kill the men, and when he says spare their women, it doesn't mean we're going to let them go. It means we're not going to kill them so that we can take them into our courts. They become our slaves. That's how you destroy a movement, where you don't let the descendants continue. So his position is very clear. What he is setting out to do is very clear. What does Hazrat Musa do? In the next verse, Musa said to his people, turn to Allah for help and have sabr. Turn to Allah for help and have sabr. Now the question is, this is a prophet of God who knows that there is an army coming to butcher the men and to take away the women as slaves. Do you think he's gone to the people to say, don't worry, it will pass, let's just chill and relax? Is that what is meant by him? The context of this shows us that no, the sabr that he was speaking about is something else from what we have understood. The earth indeed belongs to Allah, and he gives its inheritance to whomever he wishes of his servants, and the outcome will be in favor of the muttaqeen. That's a sign of victory. As Musa is saying, have sabr and you will be victorious. Have sabr and you will be victorious. This is a very key term that comes in the Quran, or a key concept that comes in the Quran, gaining victory. Right? What does gaining victory mean? Let me pose this question to you. Imagine you're playing a football match and the other team doesn't show up and you guys play. You decide, okay, the other team hasn't showed up, so we're just gonna take some shots at goal, do some practice and go. If someone said, oh, look at these people, they were victorious, that sounds like a joke, right? Victory only makes sense when there is a challenge. Victory only makes sense when there is an opposition, a test, a trial. Victory makes sense in the battlefield. Victory does not make sense in, oh, look, the enemy is coming, let's all run away to the mountains and pray on our tasbeehs so everything will be fine. Victory only makes sense when you are taking on the challenge and you're coming out on top. So when in this verse you see that Hazrat Musa is saying, have sabr so that you may be victorious, you can understand that sabr is a tool used to fight in the battlefield, and it helps you to become successful. If you do not take on challenges, if you do not take on the battlefield, then the whole concept of sabr is questionable in relation to you. Please recite salawat. Please recite another salawat. So inshallah, what we want to open up in the next coming days is the fourth Imam using this steadfastness, this resistance that he had to carry out a couple of duties which were assigned to him by Allah, as were assigned to all of the Imams. You need to understand how this tool helped him in doing that. And of course, as followers of this fourth Imam, the reason why we're doing that is so that we can also go on that path and use that tool for our benefit as well. What are the two duties Of course, these are many, but our scholars have tried to summarize this in two main duties that the Imam had. Number one is the building and strengthening of individuals. And number two is the building and strengthening of a divine system. Okay, so individuals and system. Now, I've said it in this order, but I will open up some brackets over here. The more important one to do, please do not mistake my words. The more important one to do is the building of the system. That cannot happen without the building of the individuals. But what is the objective? The objective is to build a system. That's the objective. To the extent I would say, whenever you see any of the Imams, whenever you see our final messenger or any of the prophets, working with individuals on issues that are very personal in the apparent, it is so that the pillars and the foundations can be ready for the system to be placed upon. Those individuals were supposed to become the pillars and the foundations for the system to be placed upon. Now think about the time of our fourth Imam, how heavy of a duty that is. Again, I repeat, and I'll repeat this every night if I have to. After the four rebellions against the government of Yazid, the Imam said that there were only 22 people left on the religion. That is what he has to build up to a divine system. Another point I'll open on the side over here is why the divine system? And if divine system is so important, then what about personal development and the importance of that? And then how can you say that the building and establishment of a divine system is more important than this, for example? Imam Khomeini, for example, he says that the awjib al-wajibat, like the most wajib of wajib acts, is the establishment of the Islamic system. Why? Very simple. When you work with an individual, inshallah, you can help improve them, get rid of their weaknesses, help strengthen their strengths, and they become a better person. But if you are able to establish a divine system, not only are you having an effect on those factors which affect each individual on a personal level, in their tarbiyah, you're also going to become in charge of taking on those factors which affect every individual from outside of themselves. So for example, the media, the environment that is created because of the policies and laws that you make, the environment that is created because of the economy that you're going to have, and so on and so forth. You can begin to see that the building of the system is so important because it takes care of a lot of factors which can help individuals reach a point. There's a very beautiful picture painted by Ayatollah Khamenei in this book that he has by the name of Insana de Vista Panja Saleh, or the 250-year-old man. Essentially, it looks at the lives of the 14 Ma'sumin from the angle of the struggle they had against the oppressors, different events that took place in their lives. Over there, he says that the role of an imam, or if you look at the Shia movement, it's like a flow of water. You see it go up. So imagine, like, you see a stream of water developing from the top of a mountain. You see this flow of water come down. Sometimes it comes down, sometimes it goes up. Sometimes this water goes underground and you can't see it anymore. And underground, sometimes this water turns into a raging stream, to the extent that there is a point where it makes a break in the rock that's above it and it comes out of it. And he says, this is the Shia movement. This is the Shia movement, and it was the efforts of our imams. And this is so evident in the life of our fourth imam. It's the efforts of the imam which allowed this stream to go on this journey. But the color of this stream, the water did not change. The taste of this water did not change. The smell of this water did not change. It remained pure. And this was because of the efforts of our imams. This, inshallah, will open up in the coming nights. Hopefully in the 2 nights that we have remaining, we'll look at the events that actually took place in the life of our beloved Imam. When it comes to the masa'ib of these nights, these are the nights where we remember the difficulties that the caravan of Sayyid al-Shuhada faced after Ashura. But as much as you try to turn towards the calamities that came after Ashura, you get pulled back to what happened on the day and on the night before. With our fourth Imam, imagine being in a situation where you are in the tent, you're on the bed, you know you're on the battlefield, you know you are completely surrounded by the enemy. You know how few of you there are and how many of them exist. And yet, due to divine wisdom, taken that struggle. Remaining requires you to be a mountain of sabr. This is who our fourth Imam was. And this is the beginning of his leadership. Imagine being in that tent, listening to the du'as, the supplications of the companions of the Imam. But then also imagine one by one, you stop hearing the companions. One by one, you see that there are less and less people reciting the du'as. Imagine you're in that tent and you're sick and you're ill, you can't move, but you find comfort in the Quran that is being recited by Qasim. You find comfort in the adhan of Ali Akbar. The beautiful fragrance of just the presence of Banu Hashim would bring you ease, would bring you comfort. Then one by one, you hear one less voice as they leave for the battlefield. Imagine how worried he would have been. So you're there, you can't see what's happening outside because you're on the bed. But one by one, you're hearing less and less voices. How must that make our beloved Imam feel? Imagine being in that tent and at least finding comfort in hearing the footsteps of Hazrat Abbas. Remember, Hazrat Abbas was such a figure that it wasn't just the children who found comfort in his footsteps. He could probably hear a point where the children are crying out Al-Atash and he's in that tent. But it's okay because Uncle Abbas is there. But imagine how he would have felt if all of a sudden, rather than the children crying out, I want water, they start crying out, I want my uncle, I want my uncle. And then imagine you're in a position where you just stop hearing anyone. How is that going to make you feel? Through that hot breeze that was there, maybe, just maybe, the Imam could hear the faint, weak cry of a thirsty baby. Maybe he found comfort in knowing at least one of my brothers is still here. And I wonder how long he heard this cry of the baby before the Imam came to his tent for the final farewell. Remember, this is after Imam Sayyid al-Shuhada has dealt with Hazrat Ali Yasir, comes into the tent. And our fourth Imam says to his father, "My dear father, where's Ali Akbar?" The Imam responds, "He's no longer with us." "Where is Abbas?" "He's no longer with us." Now, I'm not sure how many names the fourth Imam was able to go through, but there came a point where Sayyid al-Shuhada said to his son, "Just know that there our family of the Prophet." We mentioned the difficulties that were faced. It was so much more difficult for so many reasons. You know, it doesn't take this long to get from Kufa to Sham. Even if you're in a caravan, it doesn't take this long to get from Kufa to Sham. A path was chosen where they could make the most of the celebrations. They would send out riders to the towns ahead and say that you're next. Prepare yourselves to celebrate. At least 15 places were visited before they got to Sham. At least 15 places. Every time they would reach a place, the women and children were gathered together. They were tied with one single rope and dragged into the city. Before this happened, the boxes would be brought out in front of them. Now, usually when you have a caravan that has the status that these people do, if boxes are brought out in front of you, then that means wherever you're visiting, they want you to have gifts before you enter. But we all know what was in the boxes. They were the heads of the fathers, the brothers, the uncles of this caravan. In every single place they went, they would stop the caravan, they would open the boxes, they would take out the heads and put them back on the spears. They would parade the heads in the caravan, and at the end of the city, they would put everything back in the boxes onto the next city. They the heads had been put on the spears and taken off so much that they stopped remaining in their place. They would swivel around. Zainab's in pieces. Still she worries for her Hussein. Zainab's in pieces. Still she worries for her Hussein. Her brother upon the spears, what more is her pain? His head now barely remains. His head now barely remains on top of the spear. Do not let him fall again is her only fear. The reason why the heads were being swiveled around, because they would not stand their ground. They kept on falling from on top of the stairs by the end of this journey. My dearest Hussein, Abbas's drop still hurts me. This is Lady Zainab speaking. My dearest Hussein, Abbas's drop still hurts me. This is Lady Zainab speaking, fearful that the head of her brother will fall. My dearest Hussein, Abbas's drop still hurts me. He too had no arms as he fell helplessly. So loyal to her brother, Lady Zainab, would have been thinking about how Abbas fell in the battlefield, face first on the burning sands. Why? Because he had no hands to support him. She's worried that this head of Imam Hussein does not drop to the floor and gets wounded more than what it already has gone through. Imagine what Imam Sajjad is thinking at this point. If Lady Zainab was being forced to sit on the camels with bare backs between the cities, she also had her hands tied. Whenever they would stop, they would force her off, and she would fall just like Abbas, face first into the burning sands on the way. Whenever they stopped, she went through what Hazrat Abbas went through, but the only thing she could think of is making sure that the head of her beloved brother does not fall off the spear. Ala la'natullahi ala qawmi al-zalimin. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un.
Ya Hussein, 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 Ya Hussein.
रुखसत को आए खैमे में जब शाहे करबला तो बिन्ते अली ने जोर के हाथों को दी सदा ज़ैनब गले को चूम ले भैया तो जाइए ज़ैनब गले को चूम ले भैया तो जाइए तो जाए थोड़ी देर सकीना तो जाए ज़ैनब गले को चूम ले भैया तो जाइए सो जाए थोड़ी देर तो जाए अम्मा कहेंगी देख के चेहरा लहू भरा ज़ैनब ने क्या ख्याल नहीं रखा भाई का ज़ैनब ने क्या ख्याल नहीं रखा भाई का चादर से साफ कर लूं जो चेहरा तो जाए सो जाए थोड़ी देर सकीना तो जाए ज़ैनब गले को चूम ले भैया तो जाए सो जाए थोड़ी देर सकीना जाने न देती बर्चियों बालों में मैं कभी वो माँ है और कनीज़ हूँ भैया मैं आपकी रन में बुला रही है जो ज़हरा तो जाइए तो जाए थोड़ी देर सकीना तो जाए ज़ैनब गले को चूम ले भैया तो जाइए सो जाए थोड़ी देर करनी है जंग आखिरी भैया बहन निसार खून बह रहा है कैसे चलाएंगे जुल्फ़िकार खून बह रहा है कैसे चलाएंगे जुल्फ़िकार बाजू का जख्म बांध ले पहना तो जाए सो जाए थोड़ी देर सकीना तो जाए ज़ैनब गले को चूम ले भैया तो जाइए, सो जाए छोड़ दे तो जाइए। जिंदा में हम जो कब्र सकीना बनाएंगे, क्या आप लेके हाजी को उस वक्त आएंगे, क्या आप लेके हाजी को उस वक्त आएंगे। कर लीजिए बहन से ये वादा तो जाइए, सो जाए थोड़ी देर सकीना तो जाए।
Inshallah, I'll just recite a short salam on Shahzadi Sakina as we commemorated her Shahada today. Inshallah. छोटी सी तुरबा पैमाने कहाँ, उठो सकीना चले करबला, उठो सकीना चले करबला, जिंदा से जाता है अब काफिला, उठो सकीना चले करबला। मुझे शाहज़ादी तुम्हारी कसम, न रखोगी जिंदा से बाहर कदम, सफर की अब होती है तैयारियां, हमारी में बैठे हैं अहले हरम, गुर्बत का मेरी तुम्हें वास्ता, उठो सकीना चले करबला, उठो सकीना चले करबला। वो पहले के जैसी तो गुर्बत नहीं, ऐ बीबी हमारी वो हालत नहीं, तुम्हें शामियों से अबे मेरी जान कफन मांगने की जरूरत नहीं, लो मिल गई है तुम्हारी रिदा, उठो सकीना चले करबला। मुझे याद असगर की है बेकसी, लहद से वो मैयत निकाली गई, अकेले
भरोसा नहीं शामियों का कोई, रहते हैं चारों तरफ अश्किया। उठो सकीना, चले करबला। उठो सकीना, चले करबला। या हुसैन 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 या अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए। 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 अब्बास तेरा हक है माशाअल्लाह तुझे रोए। जब शाम सहर फातिमा ज़हरा तुझे रोए। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए। दुर्गानिए पहरे पे सितमगार खड़ा है। दुर्गानिए पहरे पे सितमगार खड़ा है। कैसे तेरे लाशे पे सकीना तुझे रोए। कैसे तेरे लाशे पे सकीना तुझे रोए। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए है। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए। जिस वक्त उठाया ना गया लाशा जवां का, जिस वक्त उठाया ना गया लाशा जवां का, शहर उस घड़ी अकबर से ज़्यादा तुझे रोए। शहर उस घड़ी अकबर से ज़्यादा तुझे रोए। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए। ज़ैनब ने कहा शाम में गरीबा में गाजी। ज़ैनब ने कहा शाम में गरीबा में गाजी। बेपरदा मुझे देख के बाबा तुझे रोए। बेपरदा मुझे देख के बाबा तुझे रोए। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना माशाअल्लाह तुझे रोए। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए। सजदे के लिए जब लिया हाथों का सहारा, सजदे के लिए जब लिया हाथों का सहारा, तो सच्चा मुसल्ले पे हमेशा तुझे रोए, सजाद मुसल्ले पे हमेशा तुझे रोए। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए, अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए, अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए। अरमान सकीना था जितना तुझे रोती, अरमान सकीना था जितना तुझे रोती, सजा तेरी कब्र पे उतना तुझे रोए, सजाद तेरी कब्र पे उतना तुझे रोए। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए, अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए, अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए। मशकीज़ा कहीं जिस्म कहीं हाथ कहीं है, मशकीज़ा कहीं जिस्म कहीं हाथ कहीं है, जा जा के कहा फातिमा ज़हरा तुझे रोए, जा जा के कहा फातिमा ज़हरा तुझे रोए। अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए, अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए, अब्बास तेरा हक है ज़माना तुझे रोए। सूरह कहफ सुनाता है ये सर किसका है, 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 सूरह कहफ सुनाता है ये सर किसका है। खून आंखों से बहाता है, खून आंखों से बहाता है ये सर किसका है, सूरह कहफ सुनाता है ये सर किसका है, सूरह कहफ सुनाता है ये सर किसका है, सूरह कहफ सुनाता है ये सर किसका है। चलते चलते जो सकीना कहीं गिर जाती है, चलते चलते जो सकीना कहीं गिर जाती है, खुद को नेज़े से गिराता है, खुद को नेज़े से गिराता है ये सर किसका है, सूरह कहफ सुनाता है ये सर किसका है, सूरह कहफ सुनाता है ये सर किसका है, सूरह कहफ सुनाता है ये सर किसका है। जिस तरफ जाता है बाजार में सर अकबर का, जिस तरफ जाता है बाजार में सर अकबर का, उस तरफ देखता जाता है, उस तरफ देखता जाता है ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है। जिस तरफ जाता है बाजार में सर अकबर का, जिस तरफ जाता है बाजार में सर अकबर का, उस तरफ देखता जाता है, उस तरफ देखता जाता है, ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है। जब भी दाखिल किसी बाजार में होते हैं गरम, जब भी दाखिल किसी बाजार में होते हैं हरम, पहला पत्थर यही खाता है, पहला पत्थर यही खाता है, ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है। रात होती है तो मासूम सी एक बाजी को, रात होती है तो मासूम सी एक बाजी को, चोरीने से सुनाता है, चोरीने से सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है। ये समा काश न देखे कोई ख्वाहिश की, ये समा काश न देखे कोई ख्वाहिश की, शिम्र जुल्फों से उठाता है, शिम्र जुल्फों से उठाता है, ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है। वो आबिदे बीमार था, वो आबिदे बीमार था, चलने से जो लाचार था, चलने से जो लाचार था, और शाम का बाजार था, और शाम का बाजार था, और मुस्तफा मौला हक इमाम या हुसैन, मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या
अस्सलामु अलैका या रसूल अल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या हबीब अल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या नबी अल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या हुज्जत अल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या अबा अब्दिल्लाह हुसैन, अस्सलामु अलैका या अबना रसूलिल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या अबना अमीरुल मोमिनीन व अबना सय्यिदुल वसीय्यीन, अस्सलाम अलैका इब्ना फातिमा ज़हरा सय्यदत निसाइल आलमीन। अस्सलाम अलल हुसैन व अला अली इब्न हुसैन व अला औलादिल हुसैन व अला अस्हाबिल हुसैन। अस्सलाम अलैका गरीबल गुरबा। अस्सलाम अलैका मुइन अज़्ज़ाफ़ा वल फ़ुक़रा। अस्सलाम अलैका मुग़ीस शिय्यत व ज़ुब्बार फ़ी यौमिल जज़ा। अस्सलाम अलैका मौलाया साहिबल असर वज़ ज़मान। अलमान अलमान मिन फितनतिज़ ज़मान। अस्सलाम अलैका शरीकल क़ुरआन। अस्सलाम अलैका मज़हरल ईमान। अज्जलल्लाहु तआला फरजक व सहलल्लाहु तआला मखरजक व ज़हूरक वजअलना मिन आवानिहि व अंसारिहि बिरहमतिक या अरहमर राहिमीन। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद। अल्लाहुम्मा कुल्लि वलिय्यिका अल-हुज्जत इब्न हसन सलवातुका अलैहि व अला आबाई फी हाज़िहि साअति व फी कुल्लि साअ वलिय्यन व हाफ़िज़न व क़ाइदन व नासिरा व दलीलन व ऐना हत्ता तुस्किनहु अर्ज़का तौआ व तुमत्तिअहु फ़ीहा क़वीला बिरहमतिका या अरहमर राहिमीन। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला